So my name is Kerim Satirli. I'm a senior developer advocate at HashiCorp, where I focus on teaching people best practices and solid patterns around infrastructure and workload orchestration. A couple different ways. We're a developer tools company. We make software that you can use to build your infrastructure, provision your infrastructure. And so one of those approaches, or most of those approaches, require us to think about testing. Before we want to roll out a whole network of workload orchestration or a security solution, we want to make sure it works. So we have currently in beta our own AI solution that helps you write test for those, figure out all the test cases, not just the happy path that we always think about, it's the easy one, but also the hard path. Like, what are the things that you should be testing for that you never think of? And that's on a company level. Personal level, GitHub Copilot, huge fan. It's just so nice to talk about your code with somebody, even if that somebody is a couple of thousand servers somewhere in the cloud, and just get a response back that makes you feel that, hey, maybe you're on the right path, maybe not. Biggest thing I'm working on right now, both company and personal, is I'm a huge fan of putting computers in places where you would think that this doesn't make sense. I like home automation, and I think that's how it started. And so a couple friends run a company that produces carrier boards where you can put a lot of compute on. So we thought, you know what, let's get a Pelican case, let's get some hardware, put those two things together. It works for the movies, why should it not work for my work? So we started doing that, and it's kind of fun to say, hey, I have a whole data center here with me in my hand. TSA doesn't love when you travel with it, but it's so much fun, and it stretches you in terms of thinking, how do we think about power consumption? How do we think about being closer to the end user, about latency and everything? And then because we have so much compute at the literal edge of what should be possible, what if we put sensors in there so the hardware we have can respond to its environment? Can see, temperature is changing, humidity is changing, maybe the noise level is changing. Can we build something interesting there that then reports back to a bigger system and helps us figure things out? Of course, a lot of that requires sifting through the data at the edge, because especially if you have very little networking bandwidth, you don't want to be sending back gigs and terabytes of images. You want your camera to be smart enough to figure out, hey, this car should not be parked here, this parcel just arrived, and go from there and just send back the relevant information. It's a fun thing to work on. Ivan Perez today talked about open source in space. Like most technologists, you're either an aviation geek or a space geek. I feel like I fall in both categories. Huge fan of seeing how organizations like NASA do stuff. We all think about them as the group that launches rockets into space. It's 100% accurate, but we should be looking towards them as the organization that figured out how to do software engineering right. NASA has beautiful guidelines that are not fun to implement, but they're incredibly useful to implement. And so Ivan talking about how they do documentation, how they generate documentation, they can go through auditing and everything in a way that works for the developers, works for the auditors, and still meets all the criteria that need to be met. It was a great talk. So initially, I had never heard of Scale by the Bay, which is a discredit to myself, because an event that's been around for 10 years through a pandemic, to me, is always impressive. And especially yesterday, seeing Alexei talk about the first 10 years, which is a huge thing, it's beautiful to see, right? It's beautiful to see how the community comes together and figures out, well, we started with this language, and we mainly talked about that language. And we, first year conferences, we mainly had speakers from my company, is what he shared. These days, if you look around, internationally recognized speakers, AI, everything at scale, learnings, and I think the most important part, unguarded learnings. It's not somebody trying to make it seem like, shit hit the fan, but actually being truthful and honest, like, hey, look, these are hard problems. This is what we have to solve. And we're 80% there, but we're not 100% there. That kind of vulnerability, to me, always makes a speaker more approachable, more authentic. And it also makes me feel like I'm talking to somebody who is not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk. And that's somebody you want to and can learn from. So I think come here with an empty mind. Don't come here tired and unready and unwilling to learn. And, let your mind be blown for 2 days and go home with a couple of new ideas.